have the pleasure of introducing today's guest of honor. Sangeeta Pillai is a podcaster, writer, and activist, and she is the founder of South Asian feminist network Soul Sutras, which is all about tackling cultural taboos. She is recognized as one of the biggest South Asian feminist voices in the UK. Sangeeta also happens to be the creator of Masala podcast, which is the winner of 5 British Podcast Awards during 2020, 2021, and 2022. She is also winner at Spotify Sound Up 2018 and has been nominated a Changemaker at the Visionary Awards 2021. She is also the creator of the Masala Monologues, series of writing workshops and theatre shows across the UK and United States. Sangeeta has been featured on BBC Radio, The Guardian, Evening Standard, Cosmopolitan, Stylist, Eastern Style, Huffington Post, BBC Sounds, Brown Girl Magazine, The Observer, Women's Health Austria, and Indian Herald, amongst many others. She has been a speaker at WOW Festival, Shameless Festival, Prima Donna Festival, as well as being on innumerable panels and podcasts. Sangeeta has written for The Guardian, Cosmopolitan, Stylist, The Metro, and has been a writer for over 20 years. And along with this, she also had a very illustrious corporate career. More than anything else, what I know for sure is she is an evangelist for women's whispered voices, and she's going to speak to us on Alternate Lens, Women Empowerment, a Feminist Self-Mandate. Happy to have you, Sangeeta. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nagendra. That's a really, really effusive introduction. Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for whoever's attending. I see 38 people on a Saturday evening. That's, I think, absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to talk, like Dr. Nagendra said, about feminism, and about not just about feminism as a cause, but about feminism as a route to change for all of us, and not just for women. So if you might allow me, I'm going to share my screen and talk to you about a few things that I really wanted to discuss with you. Okay, why are we not? Okay, here we go. So if anyone's can't see the screen or whatever, please pipe up and say something, but I will just carry on.
We can see it.
You can. Wonderful. So a real joy to be here. You can see my name and you can see where I am from. So this is how I like to describe myself. First of all, a proud feminist. I think my entire life has led up to this. And even when I didn't know what feminism was, I was a feminist. You know, I was kind of the things I was saying as a young girl and as a young woman, which I didn't really know the language for at that point. I've gone on to become an award-winning podcaster. I'll share about my podcast and how that's allowed me to really own my voice. I'm very much an activist for women's rights, particularly for women from our culture. So in the West, they call us South Asian. So anybody that's from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka is referred to as South Asian, because I think a lot of white people can't be bothered to tell the difference between us. But anyway, that's the kind of, I'll use that a lot today, so you know. And I'm also a writer. So I've always written kind of all my life. So before we kind of begin, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself, not so much the bio kind of description, but really kind of where I'm from and what my journey's been about. So I grew up in India. I grew up in a very poor family in Bombay. I'm from Kerala. My family are from Kerala, but we moved when I was a year old. I spent most of my, I was, I think, 29 when I moved to Bangalore. And then I was about 30 when I moved to the UK, 31. So I moved to the UK about 17 years ago. I've always worked in advertising, worked in some large global agencies like Lintas and Dentsu and places like that. And when I moved to the UK, that's kind of what I started with, working in advertising. But about 5 years ago, I had a big, I guess, a revelation, or some might call it a midlife crisis, I don't know. But I really wanted to do something that meant something to me, and not just kind of corporate work, which is still valuable, but I wanted to do something a bit more meaningful. And I set up Soul Sutras. The point of Soul Sutras is to give a voice to South Asian women all over the world. So that's Indian women, South Asian women in the UK, South Asian women in the US, Australia, wherever you're from. If you're from this culture, I want you to have a voice, and I want to be able to help you find that voice. I've gone on to create Masala Podcast, which has won multiple awards, which I will tell you about later. I've also done Masala Monologues, which is like a series of workshops, and I've written a book about it. I've had loads of conversations with women from our culture about the issues we have within the culture and how we can start to change that, how we can kind of take the bits from our culture that really make us happy and serve us, and sort of question some of the things that no longer serve us. Masala Podcast started from my kitchen table, literally. I was, over chai, I'd invite these guests, other South Asian women who were inspiring, and get them to talk to me over chai. And I kind of had my recording kit on the table. I didn't have any media contacts. I didn't know anyone at the BBC. I didn't even know what podcasting was. I say this on a lot of workshops. Before I started doing my podcast, I was on Google typing, what is a podcast? I didn't really know. I thought, how is a podcast different from a radio show? So that's kind of how I started. And now I live in the UK, I live in London, and I come back to India quite a lot. I'm in India right now, I'm in Bangalore. And I carry on my work, and that's kind of a little bit about me. I have a question for you guys. It's a very simple question. Do you believe men and women are created equal? And I want to stop sharing, and I'd like to see a show of hands or a wave or whatever. I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see this. Can I see from attendees? Yeah. Show of hands. Regin, thank you. Who else? Nobody else in this believes that men and women are equal. Okay. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Lijo. Thank you, Fanny. Thank you very, very much. Okay. I will go back to sharing. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let me just hang on. Sorry. Okay. Share screen. Apologies.
Yes.
Okay, great. So hopefully it should share. Yeah. So those of you who've raised your hand, congratulations, you're a feminist. Because feminism isn't about hating men. There's this perception that all women who are feminists hate men and don't want. I like men. My have friends who are men. My brothers are men. We don't burn bras. We don't kind of go around, kind of angry all the time. We're quite happy people, as you can see on my face. I'm quite a happy individual. So feminism, very simply, if you look up the Oxford Dictionary, is a belief that men and women deserve the same rights and opportunities. Like, that's it. It's that simple. And I think it's got a bad press in, I don't know, I guess the last decade, where feminism is seen as this really angry, man-hating kind of thing. And it is not. It is simply believing that men and women deserve equal opportunities in the world. As simple as that. Coming back to why does the world need feminism? And you might be sitting wherever you're sitting today on a Saturday evening, and you're thinking, yeah, that's all very well. There are kind of more important things in my life. I'm more worried about my family, or I'm worried about my job, or whatever it is that is top of mind for you. But I am here to tell you that it is really, really important, and it is fundamentally more important than we realize in so many ways. Let's start by kind of looking at India. So you've probably, if you read the newspapers and if you rewatch TV, you know that the crimes against women are very, very high in our country. So these are some of the statistics I picked up. It's the highest it's been in 6 years. I think the statistic is 2021, December 2021, they record 428,000 plus cases crimes against women. That's a rise of 26% over 6 years. A lot of those cases in 2021 were kidnapping, abduction, rape, domestic violence, dowry. There were acid attacks, trafficking, all of this. And without kind of going into the details and the data of it, we all know when we look around the cities that we live in, that most of our cities aren't really safe for women. And look at how we talk to our sisters or our mothers or our wives or partners or girlfriends, that we ask them to be careful. And that is not a world that we want our daughters to grow up in. and I really feel very strongly about this. And it's not just India. If you look at the world, all over the world, 30% of women in the world are subjected to physical or sexual violence, usually by their partner, husband or partner. 27% of women between the ages of 15 and 49 have been subjected to violence, physical or sexual. 24% of girls, adolescent girls between 15 and 19 experienced violence. 81,000 women and girls were killed in 2020. 47,000 of them by a family member or a partner. And things have gotten much worse over COVID. This data that I was looking up said that in 8 Asian countries, internet searches went up massively during COVID because women were scared and looking for help. And, and that, I don't know about you, but that's not the sort of world I want I don't have kids, but I have friends who have daughters, and I don't want them to grow up in that kind of world. And I think that world needs to change. So I very strongly believe that the world needs feminism. And I think it's not just the world, the corporate world needs feminism. And I am here to tell you a few interesting facts about this. So how female friendly is the corporate world? I mean, you all work in large organizations, I'm sure, and you've kind of been in boardrooms and meetings and you've seen for yourself. So while there is representation in the offices and in the corporate spaces that we work in, only 7% of the FTSE 100 companies have a female CEO. And this, while it's been proven that if your company has a female CEO, you are more likely to be profitable. There's data, 87% of Fortune 500 companies in 2021 with female CEOs reported above average profits. That's a lot, 87%. There's a McKinsey study that I found, and they said that if you had gender diversity in your top executive teams, you were 21% more likely to have above average profitability. Numbers talk. I mean, we know that, right? The same study found that if your executive teams had more women in them, there was more chances of higher revenue. And this is McKinsey. This is, a big, big, big name is saying that having women at the top of your corporate kind of structure is actually profitable for you. There's other stats. So, I've just put this feminism is equal to success in the corporate world because I just thought it was a catchy title. There was another study done by this company in 2016. They analyzed the performance of 21,980 firms in 91 countries. And again, they found the same thing, that if you had women in top leadership roles, the financial profitability went up. Another study in the US did the same thing, looking at 1,500 companies over 15 years, and showed that if you had women in senior management, organizations' profits went up, innovation went up. So, these are not just voices of women like me or other women saying that, come on, you need to have kind of representation. You need to have representation because it's good for your profitability. It's good for the bottom line. It's good for the shares. It's good for, the company's performance overall. So in summary, what do we learn when we look at these statistics and figures and what all these companies are saying? If you have women in senior positions, you have better productivity, better economic growth. You have increased organizational performance. Companies can get better talent and retain employees because they're seen as more kind of forward, they're seen as more modern, and employees want to work in those sorts of companies. The reputation of the company is a lot better. Like I've seen a lot of kind of articles by female CEOs. A lot of Indian companies have had female CEOs, I think. And I see a lot of PR write-ups. It looks good. It looks good on kind of PR, on kind of your website, on your social media. So I think feminism does make good business sense. Here's this thing that I get asked a lot about. What do men care about feminism? Why does it matter to men? Actually, I'm here to tell you that patriarchy is really bad for men. Here are a few things I've got. I didn't have the time to put down more, but one of the shocking things that I've discovered is that suicide rates among men is much, much higher. 80% of suicides in the world are men. And it's a very sad thing. And I think it comes because men are told to keep their feelings bottled up. You have to be a man. You don't have to show the world vulnerability. You can't admit to kind of softer emotions. So you keep it all bottled in until one day you can't. And sadly, that's how it ends for a lot of men. So that is a direct result of patriarchy, of old value systems that kind of keep men in these loops, you know? What about the other thing? What if a man wants to be a teacher or wants to be in some sort of caring profession? Again, most men are told that that's not manly enough, that's not man-like. So you don't get men going for those kind of roles. A man might be a really good teacher or a nurse or whatever, you know, but they are actively discouraged. Again, from an emotional kind of point of view, men are always told, you have to be tough, you have to be hard, use violence. And what does it mean to be human? To be human is to have all kinds of emotions, from anger to tenderness to love to, you know, everything. And men, sadly, are encouraged to never show that side of them. And I think that's a real, real shame. Feminism is good for the future. Feminism helps us build a better next generation, a more resilient next generation, because strong women build strong children. I mean, we know that even in your own homes. If you look at, if a strong mother raised you, you know you have that kind of self-belief. It comes from the mother a lot of times. If you have a wife who's quite a strong figure, you can see the kids picking up those kind of qualities. So it's really, really good for a future generation to have strong feminism in the world. I also believe that some of the global issues we face, whether it's climate change, economic kind of deprivation in certain sections of society, I think feminism or female qualities of kind of caring, thinking about other people, you know, I believe these are female qualities. And I believe these are qualities that exist in our culture as well. Look at some of our goddesses, you know, Saraswati, Parvati, even Kali, you know, who's destructive. But, you know, these are strong, you know, female inspirational figures that we've all grown up with. And I think they are good for the world in general. So, which brings me back to, so yes, if I don't know how many of you have convinced, I have convinced that feminism is good for the world and good for the corporate world and good for all of us. So even if we have convinced each other that feminism is good for us, there's often a question that what can one person do to change the world? One person is just one solitary person. And what power do we have? I'm here to tell you that we have a lot of power. One person can change the world or start to change the world. And I'm an example of that, a prime example of that. So like I was telling you at the beginning of this Masala podcast, I started that at my kitchen table 3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago, without any idea of what a podcast was, how you created one, where did you upload, how did people listen to it? But it came from my feminism. It came from my activism. It came from my belief that women like me needed a platform, that women like me needed to hear other women's stories, stories of perseverance, stories of strength, stories of kind of overcoming odds and becoming strong female figures. And that's what led to the podcast. Today, Masala Podcast has won multiple awards. I've just won 6 British Podcast Awards. So British Podcast Awards are like the Grammys of the podcasting world. And you have trophies and you have this gala kind of ceremony. And Masala Podcast won 5 of those. Masala Podcast is now a Spotify original podcast, so which means they're sponsored by Spotify. I flew to India less than a week ago, and the night before I attended another award ceremony. Masala Podcast won an audio production award. I was nominated as a change maker. That's somebody who's creating change in society. The podcast is seen as one of the top feminist podcasts in the UK. I just heard yesterday, so Spotify do this end of the year wrapped thing for podcasts, and it shows you a lot of the statistics. So Masala Podcast was among the top 5 most shared podcasts globally, and the top 5 most followed podcasts around the world in 63 countries. So the reason I'm telling you all of this, of course, I'm really proud that I've created this, but the reason I'm telling you this is change is possible. That's one individual. That was just me, one woman, single woman, who decided to do something to change something. I wasn't happy with the way things were for women in our community. and I wanted to create some change. And that's directly a result of that belief. So activism changes lives, and feminism changes lives. There's more stuff. I've been featured on all sorts of British media. I've been on BBC Radio and Guardian, and Observer, and Sunday Times, and Cosmopolitan, loads of places. I was invited by the University of Berkeley in California to run workshops for women on their campus. I'm a regular speaker on a lot of panels in the UK and US. I always talk about the point of view of South Asian women, so women from Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan backgrounds. I've worked with a lot of corporates recently. I'm doing something for Aviva Insurance. There's a large Anchor Butter, which is like a large British brand. Superdrug, which is like this UK high street pharmacy retailer. So in every one of those places, I go and I talk about our women. I talk about the strengths. I talk about the challenges. I talk about what life is like for us, the good and the bad and the ugly, because I want the world to know who we are, the world to know what our lives are like, and the joys of our life as well as the challenges of our life. I've also written a lot of pieces in a lot of big British newspapers like The Guardian, The Metro. I'm in the process of writing a book about my experiences. So these are just some of the places I've been featured. So The Guardian wrote some very beautiful kind of reviews about the podcast. I was featured in Cosmopolitan, and it talks about my work creating a space for South Asian women. Again, another feature in The Guardian, Sangeeta Pillai uses Masala podcast to bring issues affecting British Asian women to light. There's a big feature that the Sunday Times did on me. Again, Eastern Eye, which is another South Asian publication in the UK, talks about me creating spaces for South Asian women to tell our stories. I was called a one-woman powerhouse, which I quite liked in the Observer. So yeah, feminism, activism. I believe I'm changing the lives of women every single day that I do with the work that I do. And I work alone, I work at home. I've got, people to help me, but it is pretty much me running the show. And it's important for me to believe that the work I do changes lives. And it's not just me. So I get a lot of messages. Almost every single day, I get women writing to me on my Instagram, on my Twitter, they find my email, they go to my website, and they write things to me. And they say, you've changed my life. I heard you when I was in my car. I turned on Spotify and your voice came and you said that this thing had happened to you, and that happened to me too. So it really, really helps people. These are the sort of messages I get every day. It's helping me become comfortable with who I am. I've gone to your podcast during very hard times. It's helped me realize I'm not alone. Someone wrote to me saying, I'm up at 4 a.m. and I can't sleep. And I decided to listen to Masala podcast. Suddenly my life makes sense. I got this beautiful message with this young 16-year-old girl in India. She said, thank you for your wonderful podcast. It's so inspiring to hear these stories and to know that you are never alone. That is the power of the work that I do, I think. If it helps one person feel less alone, and I think it's helped a lot of people. I mean, this year, I think I've had about 100,000 downloads. So that's the number of people who are listening, who are getting these messages, whose lives I think it is positively impacting. So the broad message of kind of my talk and what I want to say to you is, it might feel like it's just one voice, and it might feel like, what are we going to do? And what does feminism matter? Feminism matters for all the reasons I've gone through in this talk with you. Feminism matters in our own homes, in our families, for our children, for the planet, in the organizations that we work in, in every way. And it's one of those kind of hidden things, and we don't really talk about, and we think it's for somebody else to sort out. And I think it's for all of us. So whatever your kind of route, like my route is a feminist route, and I found my voice, and I think it's helping me change the world in a small way. My message to you today is this: find that little space and that little corner in your world. Find your voice, use your voice, find a way. And it doesn't need to be some big thing. It can be speaking up in a meeting. It can be supporting somebody who needs support in your organization. It can be in someone in your family, a woman maybe that needs some help and that just needs a little bit of confidence building. Because sometimes it's as simple as that. Someone saying to you, you know, I know you're nervous and I know you're scared, but I know you can do this. And that will make all the difference. That can change someone's life. So that's my big message today. I urge you to find your voice, find your space, use your voice to change the world. That's me. That's all from me. Thank you so much for listening and for turning up today. There'll be time for questions and answers. And if any of you want to contact me, that's my email. If you go to soulsutras.co.uk, that's me. Email at soulsutras.co.uk. I'm on Instagram as Soul Sutras, Twitter as Soul Sutras, and LinkedIn as well. I think Dr. Nagendra and TimesPro have shared that on their LinkedIn. Sangeeta Pillai, if you look for me, you'll find me. So thank you so much. And I'll stop sharing and we can start with any questions that anybody's got.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. I think it's very authenticated version of what you have been doing. And we do have some questions. And with your permission, can I start them?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah. There's a question. Actually, there's a perspective as well as a question from Komandori Sanjana. And her first perspective is, my first CEO in the company I worked was a female who has retired, but is still remembered and compared to the men who have succeeded her for the quick and calculative decision-making capabilities that she had, which had helped the growing life insurance company 2005 and 2012 period. I think wonderful to share that perspective and maybe a nice incident as well, Sanjana. And Sanjana's question, Sangeeta, is to shine in a so-called men-dominated corporate space. Does it make you get noticed? It might make you to get noticed, but you find the male ego and insecurity creep up, which does hinder your growth. Your comments, please.
That's a really good question. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it helps to know that women help other women. So it's a complicated one. But I think the way to think about it is you get one chance, you're in a meeting or you're in a boardroom, and you get that one chance and think to yourself, would the other person stop speaking because they are giving you the opportunity? That never happens. So if the floor is yours and if there's something important that you think it is necessary to say it. Egos can be fragile, men's egos or women's egos. They are not our concern. Our concern is to grow ourselves, grow the organization, grow whatever. If you're an activist, that. And I think don't worry about other people. The more we spend time thinking about other people, the less we think about why we're here. I feel like we've got a limited number of hours on this planet, and in that time, think, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And go after it. Opportunities are limited. Go after it.
Thank you. And before I come to the question, we have a few other questions, but what we have seen in India, definitely, we couldn't agree more with you on all the studies, and that's definitely great. But having said that, Sangeeta, I think what we have also witnessed in India is that, I think we at some point of time, the entire country was so excited and inspired by some of the women who have reached the top and who broke the glass ceiling. But yet, I think we end up seeing some other side of the stories, in the sense that we had two CEOs who were, what I would say is that who were caught for their misfeasance as far as the companies are concerned. One is Chanda Kochar, and the other one is Chitra Ramakrishnan of NSE. Now, this is these two people, right? I think right now both the people are just facing their charges in the court, and that's one. When they have put on such a high pedestal, yes. The entire country was looking up to them. They were getting inspired. And they're all over the country and across the globe, and you name it, all the rankings, and all that is there. At the end of the day, suddenly they just, I think they lost the moral ground because of we don't know again, but the point is that we get to see both the sides of the story, but only thing is that the court of law has to establish as to what they wanted. But right now that's the status, right? On the other hand, we have also seen another woman, but there are many more, absolutely many more in different walks of life. But somebody like Malvika Hegde, she's a wife of Siddharth, Vijay Siddharth, who committed suicide, who was a founder and CEO of Cape Coffee Day, from Bangalore, by the way. And trust me, and what she has proven, and she's very admiring and very inspiring as well, because what she inherited was 7,500 crore debt, and everybody was writing obituary for this company and the entire business empire that he had built it for many years, and everybody thought that it's going to be dying in no time. But trust me, when she, and by the way, she never was running this company in whatsoever manner, but suddenly she takes the mantle, and in no time, over a period of 2 years time, right, she actually wipes off most of the debt. Right now it's just about a few crores now, but otherwise nobody would have expected. Very, very low profile and very gritty woman, but she proved it. And because she said that it's not to save the company, but it's to save those 25,000 employees who have been working with us for many years, and their families as well. So you said to see, these two kind of things, right? So therefore, I mean, what kind of things do you think? I mean, of course, I think your message is very clear. Be the voice of a woman there, and but you also get to see this kind of stories, right? Where people who have been, who have helped them, and who got to that hyper exalted position, but suddenly because of their, maybe ambitiousness or greediness, whatever you call it. But the point is that they just fell off the cliff there. So what would be your reading into such, these two dichotomy? I mean, it's a real dichotomy.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, I think, Dr. Nagendra. I think that there is no, nothing is black and white in life, right? It's not that all men are awful and all women are amazing. You're saints and sinners, that it doesn't exist. I think we have to push feminism because for so many decades, women have been lagging behind, and we see it in our kind of institutions. We see it in our corporate spaces. But of course, if there is a woman who, like the first example you gave, is not performing in the way that we think, we shouldn't be supporting her. Not all women, again, support other women. I've seen that as well. So I think while in general, like there are some principles we think are good. We think being kind to the environment is a good thing because it's for our future, right? In the same way, feminism is good for us because it's for our future. And there will be one or two instances where people aren't who we think they are, and then we don't support them anymore. And when people, like the second example you gave, prove beyond a doubt that, oh my God, look what this woman can do, we support them even more. So it's just case by case, and we can't sort of say in that black and white way that all women are awful or all men are awful. That's not the world. We know that,
Absolutely. Good. We have a question from Mr. Ashish Moitra, quite a long one, but let me read out for you, Sangeeta. Respect, ma'am, really out of the box thinking, and really appreciate the facts and figures you made live to us. Myself want to know, India is the most vibrant economy, but the countries which are more developed, why there is a race of male dominance? Why countries which are more powerful in terms of economy or power still having an adamant attitude to make a decision maker must be male? And all the studies and data that you mentioned, in most of the studies done on the countries where the decision maker happens to be a male. Thank you, Ashish.
Really good question, Ashish. Thank you. I think, and I'm not a kind of, the data I've got from various sources. I'm not like a sociologist. My guess is that we've had kind of male-dominated structures and institutions for so many, 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 many decades. If you look at kind of feminism, even in the West, which we are calling more developed, what is it, 20, 30 years? And we're talking about trying to win back space from hundreds of years. That's how it has always been. So I think while we are making progress, I think in every part of the world, we're making progress in the West, in India also, I think. It just takes time. I think it takes time for everybody to understand that if the world were more equal, it would benefit everybody. And in many ways, I think it's also going against, we've been told that there are very few resources and we must all fight for it. There's only this much, so fight for it. Actually, that isn't true. The things we need to live and breathe and survive, there is plenty of it. If we don't mess it up, global warming, all of that is different. But right now that exists. So I think it's going to be a slow progress. It is, you see things changing. And I think the West probably has moved ahead a little bit compared to the East, but I think the East is fast catching up. And maybe these kind of conversations that we're having today, this webinar, other things you read or follow, it will just keep pushing things forward, and we must keep pushing things forward. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a long-winded answer, but that's the best that I could come up with.
Actually, there are two questions related to your podcast.
Yes.
One is from Madhur, and the other one is from Amol Nigam, and both are related to the podcasting. And let me read out Amol's question first. His question is, how is it different to be a podcaster from a mass comm professional? How can one start from minimum of tools and arrangements to be a podcaster? That's Amol's question. And then we have another question from Madhur, and I think her question is, what is the process of starting a podcast?
Sure. Thank you for asking. Because podcasting has this mysterious things this podcast, and everybody's talking about it, but no one quite knows how it's done. So to create a podcast, all you need is one of these. I don't know. I'm trying to show you a phone, but it's getting wiped out. Anyway, you get the message. If you have a phone, if you have an idea, that's all you need. Your phone's got a recording facility. You can start a podcast there. But what I would urge you to do before you record is have an idea, because there are millions of podcasts being launched every single day all over the world. To have a podcast that has a chance of success, you need something that's unique. You need an idea that's unique. You need a concept. You need to appeal to a specific audience. And podcasting is great for niche things. I don't know. Do you want to talk about mugs? Do you want to talk about plants? Do you want to talk about something specific and niche? Podcasting is a great avenue. So you don't need a lot of kit. You can start with your phone if you don't want to spend any money. There are editing softwares like Audacity, which is free. You can just download it and you can edit online, put it together. It's a really simple process. It can be as simple or as complicated as you make it. Slightly better, you can order a voice recorder from Amazon or wherever you get your kit. You can get microphones. So for something like, if you want a professional sounding podcast, even that, I think for about, 25,000, 30,000 rupees, you can get decent kit to have a professional podcast. So that's how you begin. But I would urge you, before you begin, to think about the idea, because that's the key. If you have a good idea, you have a chance of having a successful podcast. If you don't, you can have the most expensive equipment in the world and it might not succeed. So that's a really, really important thing. Coming to the second question, what is the process? The process is you begin, as I was saying, identify the idea, talk to a few people, go to your network and say, if I created this podcast that talked about X, what do you think? And you will get an idea of people's reactions. People might say, oh, that's so interesting. I'd never thought of it. Or people might say, oh, I'm not really sure about that. So listen to what people are saying. Almost like a focus group that you do in marketing. Do the same thing with your idea. Then start to record. Think about what is the podcast? Is it just you talking about a theme? You can do that, but make sure that it's interesting and it's varied. How will you do 20 episodes of that? Is it varied enough? Is it an interview-based podcast? So mine is an interview-based podcast. So each episode of the podcast, I choose a topic and I find a guest to talk to me. So for example, I had someone on there who was talking about HIV. She's a doctor. Someone else who was talking about the Kama Sutra. She's an expert in the Kama Sutra. Someone else who was talking about the menopause, someone else who was talking, so women's issues. That's my podcast. So each episode is a theme and I interview a specialist. So that's another format that you could do. You can have another format where you have a group. There are some successful podcasts that have 3 or 4 people and talk about, and it's a more kind of informal, chit chat with your friends kind of theme. So you decide what the kind of theme or the feel or the concept is. You record it and then you upload it onto a platform, like a distributor platform, which then sends it to other platforms like Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. So that's more or less the process of idea, recording, distribution. And then you obviously have to market it because people have to know your podcast exists before they kind of try and find you or listen to you. So it's really long and I guess complicated, but that's kind of the broad basics, the nuts and bolts of it. You've gone quiet, Dr. Nugget.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for that, Sangeeta. I think I'm sure there might be a lot of people, I think, who might like to pick up this one. But just as a follow-up question to that one, is it? I would say, I'm saying out of curiosity, and maybe as a follow-up question, is there a revenue model around it at a personal level, or is it just a hobby kind of thing? Because at some point of time, somebody wants to take it maybe full time, and then they want to be like radio RJs and DJs kind of thing. That's one. I think there's still taboos around those kind of things. But if, let's say somebody wants to go full time, of course, with the process that you mentioned, is there a process of is a possibility, or what is your recommendation for someone to take it a full time? So because you still can make a living out of it.
You can definitely make a living. That's what I do. I'm a full-time podcaster, activist, writer. It's hard though. So I wouldn't say don't quit your day job just yet, is what I would say to you.
Yeah.
Because it takes time to build a podcast, to build an audience, to build a following for it. So it's like anything. It takes time to establish what it is and for people to find you, like you, recommend you to your friends. Having said that, there are a couple of revenue models for kind of podcasting. One is what I have, which is a sponsorship, which is a direct sponsor. So somebody sponsors you, a company or a platform. And that could be, for example, I don't know, if you, just as a marketing example, if you start a podcast for senior citizens, right? An insurance company that's only talking to senior citizens might sponsor you. Do you see what I'm saying? So you try and find a fit for that. So that's sponsorship. Then you have kind of things like crowdfunding. So you have, say, a group that really loves what you do and you build it up. And over time, you go to that group and you say, look, I'd really like to continue, but here are my costs. And then they will fund you. So like Buy Me a Coffee, there's loads of these kind of crowdfunded platforms. And that's another way. You could have a third way, which is like, you sell merchandise or you sell tickets to a live show. So I do that as well. I have live shows for Masala Podcast where people buy tickets. That's another revenue model. And then there are people that do combinations of these. So sponsorship along with this, something else with that. So those are the basic kind of revenue structures.
Very good. And there's a question, I think, from interesting question from Nilima Lakshmi. And her question is, can we partner with you?
Can you partner with me? Please email me. I've given my email address, so write to me if there's anything that you want to discuss. Without knowing what it is that you're talking about, it's very difficult for me to say yes or no. But I am very friendly. I am very accessible. So write to me and we can certainly see what you want to talk about.
Sure. Nilima, please get in touch with, I'm sure, she's on LinkedIn and she's also shared her coordinates, and I'm sure that, you can reach out to her and hope, things will work out in the days to come. Now, this is a question from Mr. Badla Jagdish, and his question is, ma'am, how are you addressing Adivasi woman voice?
Good question. At the moment, I'm not, because there's one of me and there's one podcast and there's only limited time and energy. It's something I would like to talk about, but I haven't really done that so far, because primarily a lot of my audience is in the UK and the US, and India is a third kind of. So in terms of hierarchy, UK, USA, India, Canada, Australia, I think those are my kind of. So at the moment, with the first initial seasons, I'm addressing broader topics. So whether that's, bodies or mental health or menopause or whatever that might be. So topics that are a lot more women from our culture have issues with. And then when I've covered all of those, I might go to kind of more niche or specific topics like the ones you mentioned. They are super important. I hope to get to it at some point, but at the moment I haven't been able to.
This is a question from Amit Motwani, Sangeeta, and his question is, please share your thoughts on leadership and your style of leadership. Thank you, Amit.
That's a really good question, Amit. Thank you for asking. My whole life kind of style in general is empathetic. And I think I embody those qualities of feminism that I talked about, which is empathy, which is caring, which is nurturing, all of those. Doesn't mean I'm a weakling, but it means I don't need to shout to get heard. And I believe that that kind of leadership is the leadership that can kind of carry on. Those are the kind of leaders that people remember. I think someone on here mentioned a senior person who had helped them in their life. I remember people like that who've helped me when I was a junior, when I was 20 years old, when I first started my career. So I think an empathetic style of leadership where you allow people space, where it's not kind of a dictatorship, where it's like, I'm saying this and that's how it is. I don't subscribe to that at all, because I don't think it helps anyone. I think it terrifies people. It doesn't give people the room to grow. So mine is a more kind of empathetic, compassionate kind of leadership style, where I like to give people the room to kind of be and grow and become who they are, because I think that in turn grows the organization. And I'm a firm believer of that.
Thank you. And this is a question from Lijo Thomas. And her question is, hi, ma'am. It's great to know you, and India needs more persons like you to address the oppressed women in our country. Could you please tell us the programs that are running or you're part of to educate and spread awareness about women empowerment in our rural areas? They lack academic education, which is one of the reasons for the current situation. Thank you, Richa. Couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a wonderful question, Richa. Thank you so much. I would love to. I think my dream is to have enough resources and people to help me to go into smaller communities and small towns and villages, because I think that's where it really is needed, even more in cities. Cities, we've got access, we can go into an office and work and make our money and travel and, have a voice. But in smaller towns and in villages, that doesn't happen. And the more kind of oppression happens from there. Like, I was born in a small village. I know my family are still in a small village. So when I go back, I can see how much room there is for growth for women, Unfortunately, I haven't got the resources. I wish I did. I wish I had a massive group of women like you, Richa, who would kind of help me reach these areas. My hope and my dream is that Soul Sutras grows enough that I can then go and kind of help people within smaller communities. I do small initiatives, like I support this small village near Coimbatore that does, where the girls have been taught to make sanitary napkins. They've been bought these machines, and all the girls in the village are taught to kind of use the machine. So I kind of support stuff like that. And my merchandise, some of it I sell, goes to them. So small things I do like that. But my dream is to kind of really go to a lot more villages and small towns and really help the young girls, because I think you're absolutely right. That's where it's needed the most.
Absolutely. I think one last question for today evening, Sangeeta. I think you've had a very illustrious corporate career, right? The question is, what was the trigger for you to hang up the boots there and get on with this, I think advocacy role, or whatever you call it, and maybe at a larger scale? Is it because of the fact that maybe you thought that maybe if I continue to work in the so-called the ceiling there, you get to maybe not expand or maybe scale up your vision for what you want to do it? Or is it because that you didn't want to have any boundaries whatsoever, so therefore you can start doing your work the way you want it?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Nagendra. I really appreciate that. For me, it was very personal. I felt like all my life I had fought for this cause without even realizing. Like, even when I was a child, even when I was constantly asking questions. And while being in the corporate world was very comfortable, as we know, the money is great, the opportunities are great, and you can keep going in that way. But I thought, getting to the age that I got to, I'm like, I've done kind of 20 something years in all these large corporates, and I can keep going and I can be comfortable and I can, have a decent life. But what I really, really, really want to do is change a little bit of the world, even if it's, like 0.0001% of the world. If I can help in any way, it would make my life more meaningful. And in some ways, it's quite selfish is the wrong word, but it is for me. I'm doing this for me.
Absolutely.
And I'm doing it for all the other girls like me. When I was 10 or 8 or 12, nobody said these things to me. And I had to figure it all for myself. And if I had my podcast when I was that age, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm not alone. There's someone else saying this stuff. I'm not crazy, So for me, it was a very personal reason to do this work, to change the world in a little bit in my own small, limited capacity. That's why.
In fact, there are a lot of things that happen in India. I mean, thanks to people like you. Maybe some of them have come from very rural background. There's a small bank in near Pune, between Pune and this one. It's entirely run by women, right?
Oh, fantastic.
It's outstanding work these people do. Very quiet, very low profile, and they make sure that they have something called as SHGs, self-help groups, right? And of course, companies also have started getting into it, from your HULs, they have the Project Shakti, and then ITCC, HOPL, and all that. I mean, every company worth its salt is definitely encouraging. But then I think what still we lack is that hinterland, that's getting stuck there, because people. And if you look at Northeast and even those interior places, we have so many people who are artisans and who create, absolutely skilled workers, right? You look at any small thing that we use, maybe bed sheets, maybe something artifacts and things like that. But only thing is, what they lack, they have the skill, but what they lack is resources to access better markets and market the products and things like that. That's one. But then we also get to see, in fact, a few days back, 2 weeks back, we had the pleasure of hosting the founder and CEO of Jaipur Rugs, Sangeeta, and this is which is again born out of his own the idea that he wanted to empower women, and then 95% of this products, and by the way, he sells to 60 different countries, and all these products, the rugs, world-class rugs, by the way, and he's got a lot of awards, including from BBC and all that, and they're all made by women. So there are a lot of stories.
So amazing, so amazing.
And
this weekend, I was at this arts fair, and I bought a beautiful couple of products from this company. They do like earrings and necklaces, beautiful.
Yes,
and again, it's run by women, and all the artisans are women. And I think if we had more of these, I think the world would be a far better place, far more beautiful place, I think, to be sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sangeeta. And sorry if you have taken a little more time.
No, that's absolutely fine.
And definitely, we wish that people like you, the tribe of your nature, keep growing, so that we will have more illustrious daughters of this country across the globe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy. I'm going to leave my website on here, because I know sometimes women can be very shy to speak. So if anybody wants to get in touch, that's my website. Is that correct? Yeah.
Sure.
And enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for taking the time to turn up on a Saturday evening. I'm very impressed that 40, 50 people turned up. And Dr. Nagendra, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. And look forward to seeing you sometime soon in Bombay.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.